In this guide, I will show you a Scourge build that you can use to dominate everything in all PvE game modes, whether it's for open world and account progression, or for group content like Fractals, strike missions, and raids. The build will offer very high damage and sustain, and it will provide lots of barrier and lots of boons, including Alacrity and protection, and all of this while being beginner friendly and easy to use. And at the end of the guide, I will show you how you can use this build as a very good option for Condi DPS and Alacrity DPS for group content. I will now show you the main setup for the build, and in the description below you will find other options that can be cheaper and easier for you to get if needed. I also just made a guide that shows you how to gear up any character from scratch from many sources, all of which are easy and cheap to get. You will find the link for that guide in the description below. For the armor, we will use a full set of Viper with Trapper runes, and you will find a wiki link in the description that will show you how to get Trapper runes. And then we have Pistol Torch as our weapons with Sigil of Torment and Sigil of Earth. The placement of the sigils matter, so try to put the Torment on the pistol and the Earth on the torch. And then we have a Settler Warhorn with Sigil of Leeching. For the Trinkets, we have a full set of Celestial, and we are using the Relic of Akim. And once more, you will find cheaper and easier options in the description below if it was needed. For the food, we will use Meaty Asparagus Skewer, and for the utilities, we will use Master Tuning Crystals or Potent Master Tuning Crystals, both of which will give you the exact same stats, but the opponent will go for 1 hour, and it's more cost efficient. For the traits, we have Soul Reaping, 1, 1, 3, and then Curses, 1, 3, 3, and Scourge, 1, 3, 3. For the utility skills, we have Signet of Vampirism and Signet of the Locust, and then we have Spectral Grasp with Serpent Siphon, and the elite is Ghastly Breach. Now let's explain how this build works. In Soul Reaping, we have all 3 minor traits that will work very well with your Shroud. Gluttony will increase the amount of life force you will get from any of the sources by 10%. And then Sinister Shroud will reduce all of your Shroud skills by 15%. And Soul Battery will increase our life force by 20%, so you will have this bar go for longer. Unyielding Blast will make all of your Shroud skills apply 2 stacks of vulnerability. The trait will tell you that it's only Shroud skill number 1 that will inflict vulnerability, but because of how Scourge works, all of the other Shroud skills will also have the benefit of F1, which means they will also apply vulnerability. Soul Barbs will increase your damage and condition damage by 10% for 15 seconds every time you go in and out of Shroud. And your F5 here will work with this trait, which technically means that you should have this buff constantly working with you. And Doomfire will make your F1 skill apply burning when you use them, and just like Unyielding Blast, all of your Shroud skills will also apply burning when you use them. Doomfire will also have 1 second internal cooldown, which means if you used all of your Shroud skills at once, you will not apply 4 stacks of burning. However, if you try to space them out and use each one with at least 1 second in between, you should apply a lot more burning. In Curses, we have Barbed Precision will apply a lot of bleeding, because every time you apply a critical hit, you have 33% chance to also apply bleeding. On top of that, it will increase your bleeding duration by 20%. This will work well with Furious Demise, because this will apply Fury when you go to Shroud, which will increase your critical chance by 25%, and it will also give you an extra 180 precision, which also means you will do more critical hits. Target of the Week will also synergize very well with the other 2 traits, because it will increase your critical chance by 2% for each condition on the enemy, and you will be doing a lot of conditions on them, and it will also convert 13% of your precision to condition damage. So all of those 3 skills will increase your critical chance significantly, which means you apply a lot more bleeding. The Adapt trait will apply Torment when you disable an enemy. Your Pistol 3 will stun, which is a disable, and your Torch 5 will also knock people down, which also a disable. Your F4 Garish Pillar will apply Fear, and we are using Spectral Grasp, which will pull enemies towards you, which is also a disable. So you have multiple skills that will work very well with this trait. This Master trait is where you will get a lot of heals, because it will convert 5% of your condition damage into healing. And with this build, you will find yourself doing tons of condition damage, so you will get tons of heals from it. And from the Grandmaster trait, we will have our condition damage increased by 200. From the Scourge trait line is where we will also get a lot more damage and sustain. Sand Sage Breach will increase our concentration and expertise by 225 anytime we have at least one shade up. And Blood as Sand will reduce the damage we take by 15% also when we have at least one shade up. Which means during the fight, try to use at least one of those 3 charges to have at least one shade and benefit from those 2 traits. Abrasive Grit will remove 1 condition and give us 2 stacks of might anytime we apply barrier to ourselves or to allies. And the Grandmaster trait will also make our F1 skill apply barrier, and anytime we apply barrier, we will also gain Alacrity. And so from those 2 traits combined, it means when we apply barrier, we will gain Alacrity and we will also gain 2 stacks of might and remove 1 condition. So barrier will be very important for this build. And then the master trait will make your F5 use Sandstorm Shroud instead of the normal one. The way this new shroud will work is, when you use it, you will notice a circle around you like this that will fill up, and then afterwards it will do an explosion. As the circle fills up, you will apply protection, and then at the end when it explodes, you will apply extra protection. And so just from your shroud, you will find yourself with tons of protection. Same thing also with barrier. Every pulse, it will give you some small barrier, and then at the end it will give you a much bigger amount. Also at the end when it explodes, it will do damage and it will apply a lot of torment. This will also remove 2 boons and convert them into conditions. So overall, it is extremely powerful for damage and for sustain. Signet of Vampirism is something we'll leave on passive most of the time because this will give you a lot of siphon heals and it will also do some passive damage. Signet of the Locust is going to increase your speed by 25% when you leave it on passive, but when you activate it, it will give you tons of heals, especially if you use it in between multiple enemies. This will also remove 2 boons. Spectral Grasp will pull enemies towards you, which will help you cleave them and get rid of them very quickly. But even more important, it will chill and it will give you 15% life force, which will give you tons of life force on your bar, and even if you are very low, it will fill up instantly and you can use your shroud skills. Wherever we cast Serpent Siphon, it will apply barrier and ages and regeneration, all of which will help us with sustain. It will also apply some poison, and it will also remove 1 boon and convert it into torment. And so because of how important this skill is, try to use it on you to gain all the benefits from it. When we drop Ghastly Breach, it will keep pulsing every second and it will apply multiple benefits. It will keep doing damage, slow, and burning, and it will also give us a lot of might, and it will also convert boons into torment. And so this is very, very powerful. Pistol Torch will be our main weapon. Your auto attack will constantly apply torment. Pistol 2 will fire multiple shots that will pierce through enemies, and each one will do some damage. They will also apply vulnerability and torment. Pistol 3 will fire 1 shot that will explode in a radius around the enemy, and so it will technically hit multiple enemies, not just one. This will do some damage. It will apply lots of poison and weakness. It will also stun, and it will give you life force. Torch 4 will apply some burning and torment, and for Torch 5 you must have a target selected, and it will only work on 1 enemy. It will knock them down, and it will apply torment, and then based on how many conditions they had, it will also give might. Now let's explain how to use this build properly. Your shroud skills will be the most important thing to use. F5 will be your main skill, and you will try to use that anytime it's available. F3 will also be very good because this will apply barrier, and we explained how important barrier is. And you also want to have at least always 1 shade up to gain the benefits from the traits we explained earlier. From those 3 skills combined, you will apply a lot of damage and you will get a lot of sustain. Don't use your F4 unless you need to fear enemies away from you if you are struggling, for example, which shouldn't be too often at all, or you need to break bar. From your utility skills, Serpent Siphon will be very important and you always want to drop it on you. Spectral Grasp you will use, especially if you have multiple enemies around you. Ghastly Breach is another one you will also use on the enemies, whether it's multiple or just one, and then just spam all of your weapon skills. Leave Signet of Vampirism and Signet of the Locust, both of them on passive most of the time, but if you needed more heals, you can't use either of them. However, Signet of the Locust will give you a lot more heals if you use it between multiple enemies. Remember that we are running a Settler Warhorn with the Leashing Sigil. So by switching to Warhorn in combat, that's already a lot of health gained, but then you also have your Warhorn 5 that is going to siphon even more health, and it will give you a lot of life force. And Warhorn 4 will apply Fear, which can be very good to break bar if needed. Now I will show you other utility options that can be useful based on the situation. Signet of Vampirism can be very good as passive and active, but it can cause you to stay in combat for a very long time. So if you found yourself struggling with this, you can use Scent Flare instead. From your elite, you can remove Ghastly Breach and you can use the Golem instead. The Golem can help with tanking mobs for you a little bit, which can take some pressure off of you. This will also knock down enemies, so it can help a lot with breaking bar. As for the rest of your utility skills, you can use minions if you found yourself struggling. The first skill you can remove will be Spectral Grasp, and you can put Shadow Minion instead. And if that was not enough and you were still struggling, you can remove Serpent Siphon and use the Bone Fiend instead. And last, if you still need it even more, you can remove Signet of the Locust and you can use the Bone Minions. However, you shouldn't need any of them except very rarely, because the build on its own generates a lot of sustain and it will do a lot of damage, and you should be able to handle everything on your own. Now I will show you how we can use this build as a very good option for Alacrity DPS with only very few changes. For the traits, we will not change anything here. However, if you found yourself struggling with Life Force and you don't have enough to keep using your Shroud skills, you can use this trait instead, Eternal Life. But otherwise, leave it with Doomfire. From your utility skills, we will use Scent Flare, we will remove Signet of the Locust and we will use Undeath, and then we can remove Spectral Grasp and we have one of two options. We will use Desiccate if your group needed Might and Fury, but if you had another reliable source for Fury, then you will use Blood is Power instead. And you will leave Serpent Siphon as it is. Also from your elite, you will use the Minion if you needed more CCs, but if not, you will go back to Ghastly Breach because this will also apply a lot of might to your group. And the last change we will need will be using Plate of Eggs Benedict instead for food, because this will give us a little bit of extra concentration that will help. So you will always use your F5, F3 and your F1 whenever they are of cooldown, and then you will also use Serpent Siphon and the other utility skill from here. You will leave Signet of Undeath on passive, and you will use Scent Flare for the extra barrier to also give Alacrity, and then just spam your weapon skills. And at the end of the guide, I will show you a quick rotation of how you can keep up your Alacrity the way I just explained it. This build can also work very well as a very high Condi DPS option, and I will show you now the changes we need for that. We will leave Soul Reaping and Curses as they are. The only changes will be in the Scourge line, and this will be 2, 2, 2. And then in your utility skills, we will not use either of those two options. Instead, you will use Will of Suffering, and we will use Blood is Power. We will also remove Scent Flare, and we will put back Signet of Vampirism. And for our elite, we will leave Charge if we need the CCs, but if we didn't need the CCs, we will use Plague Lens instead. If you want to reduce the amount of skills you use even further, remove Will of Suffering, and you can put Signet of Spite instead. And in that case, you will just leave it on passive with Signet of Undeath all the time. We can also remove Relic of Akim and use Relic of the Fractal instead. This will give us a lot more damage. And if you don't know where to get those relics from, I have another guide. I will leave the link for it in the description below. Another change you can do if you want to do even more damage, you can remove your Celestial Trinkets and you can make them Viper instead. However, I played this build as Condi DPS with Celestial Trinkets and it performed very well. To increase our damage even more, we can use Writ of Merciful Malice for utility, or if it was too expensive, you can use Writ of Land Malice instead, which is much cheaper. The rotation you will use to do a lot of damage will be very simple. Once more, your Shroud skills will be the most important ones. However, this time we will only use F5 and F2 whenever they are of cooldown. You will use F3 only if you needed the extra barrier, and you will use your F4 if you needed extra CCs to break bar. You want to always have at least one shade up to benefit from those two traits we explained previously. And from your utility skills, use Blood's Power and Will of Suffering whenever they are available, and then you will also use 2, 3 and 4 from your Pistol Torch. Only use your Torch 5 if you need the extra CCs to break bar. Plague Lens is a very good option for DPS and it will apply tons of conditions and do a lot of damage. But this will keep pulsing for 10 seconds, and you will only get the most benefit from it if it stayed on the enemies for most of the duration. So in fights where there is a lot of movement and the bosses don't stay in their positions for long, I would recommend using Ghastly Breach instead because it pulses only for 5 seconds, and so you will get more value out of it. And I will also show you some footage for the rotation for this build to be used effectively as a Condi DPS option. You will find it with the rest of the footage at the end of the guide. I hope you enjoyed this build as much as I enjoyed working on it, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you found this guide helpful, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like to see more build guides in the future. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next guide.